The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have a new education secretary. Donald Trump's selection for education secretary Betsy DeVos was confirmed yesterday with a historic tie-breaking vote from the vice president of the United States, Mike Pence, needed to break a 50-50 tie. Let's take a look at the historic moment.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the vice president votes in the affirmative and the nomination is confirmed.
President.
Majority Leader.
I move to reconsider the vote on the nomination.
And just like that, weeks of advocacy against this horrible, horrible choice to lead the country's education goes by the wayside. There were 2 Republicans that voted against Betsy DeVos's confirmation, and that's all fine, well, and good. But the real news here is that the confirmation of Betsy DeVos to Education Secretary proves you can buy into government power in the United States. You can, even if you have no business being there, end up there by sheer virtue of having a lot of money. Betsy DeVos has no business heading up education for the United States. She was embarrassed, 3, 4, 5 times during her confirmation hearings by Tim Kaine, by Al Franken, by Elizabeth Warren. Didn't matter. And Al Franken sort of asked a key question during those hearings. Would you be here if your family hadn't donated roughly $200 million to politicians? The answer is obviously a resounding no. She is only there because of her family's political contributions.
I mean, unfortunately, political patronage has been around for a long time, probably peaked in the 1880s with a spoils system. But usually the contributions would be in exchange for like an ambassadorship or something, right. Not something as brazen as Secretary of Education.
Yeah, I mean, Obama sold a ton of ambassadorships to the big bundlers that raised a ton of money for him. That's nothing new, but very clearly here, Betsy DeVos buying her way into the cabinet. She was asked whether she opposes guns in school, Rachel. She cited non-existent grizzly bear attacks as a reason to maybe have guns in schools. She didn't agree that schools that receive federal money should have to follow the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. This is someone who has no clue whatsoever about education. She couldn't even understand really simple questions about education, including from Senator Al Franken, never mind put together an even remotely informed answer. She has actually admitted that her family bought influence with her donations. Check out something that she said previously, which I'll put up on the screen for you. This is from a 1997 op-ed for Roll Call that she wrote. My family is the largest single contributor of soft money to the National Republican Party. I have decided, however, to stop taking offense at the suggestion that we are buying influence, the piece reads. Now I simply concede the point. We expect to foster a conservative governing philosophy consisting of limited government and respect for traditional American virtues. We expect a return on investment. We expect a good and honest government. Furthermore, we expect the Republican Party to use the money to promote these policies and, yes, to win elections. Well, she bought influence, Rachel. She did it. She won, I guess.
Yeah, she definitely won. What I've kind of been hearing a lot, overwhelming response is that a lot of parents are worried that she is going to take away the measures that are put in place for communications between parents and students, which a lot of people, I think Phi Delta Kappa poll said that about 2/3 of parents gave their public schools a grade of an A or a B, and then 1/3 it was about a C or a D. But what kind of overwhelmingly showed satisfaction was the communication, and a lot of people are worried that she's going to divert money away from putting in places aides and therapists to really bolster that communication.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she doesn't even conceptually support the concept of just funding public schools, and all of those aspects are going to suffer. She wants to effectively create Christian schools. That's really what her mission is, Pat. She wants to, quote, advance God's kingdom. We talked about that last time we discussed Betsy DeVos, and there's people writing to me saying, well, Why couldn't John McCain, increasingly the Republican voice of reason, at least vote against her? Well, she bought him too. Her family contributed over $50,000 to John McCain during the 36-year period starting in 1980. What about Marco Rubio, who sometimes is a Republican with a spine? He took a combined $100,000 from Betsy DeVos and her family, did vote to confirm her. That's at least partially why they didn't vote against her.
And we criticize Betsy DeVos because she doesn't have any experience with public schools. But I think that's kind of the whole point. I think that's why she was put into this position, because it's very hard to get rid of a department. And the next best thing is to just put someone in charge that doesn't even agree with it.
To understand this, and I wanted to touch on that next, you have to understand the position of some of the Republicans voting yes and many of their constituents. They want to destroy public education in this country. That's exactly what Betsy DeVos wants to do. The reasons are stick religion in school. That's one reason to put Betsy DeVos in. And take money away from public schools and to private schools. In that sense, it makes perfect sense that a lot of these Republicans would support her. That's how they see education, Rachel. They want public education to go that way.
Yeah, I'm just also thinking that her unilateral power won't even be completely strong. So she's actually in a perfect position.
Yeah, absolutely. This perpetuates the circle. You defund public schools because they're bad. They get worse because you've defunded them, which then you use to justify taking even more money away. If you have, here's my word of encouragement to the kids out there, stay in school, kids. If you have $200 million and you're at all worried, you might not be able to be, I don't know, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development because you don't know anything about it. Betsy DeVos's riches to riches story can be a huge inspiration for you, because the $200 million can get you into the cabinet. Damn it, Pat. You can do it too.
That's the American dream, isn't it?
Yeah, basically is buying power with money you've inherited from your family. Taking a page out of Kellyanne Bowling Green Massacre Conway's playbook, Donald Trump said yesterday, brace yourselves, strap in, folks, that the United States murder rate is the highest it has been in 47 years. This is, of course, false. It's part of the narrative that things are more dangerous than ever in the United States. The reality is violent crime has been on the decline in the United States and around the world for decades. Extreme poverty has been on the decline worldwide for decades. The percentage of the world's population living in the midst of wars has been on the decline for decades. And as usual, sort of implicit in Donald Trump's fake data is that it's because of the media that you haven't heard about this reality which Trump claims exists. Here's Trump speaking about this yesterday and making this totally bogus claim.
The murder rate in our country is the highest it's been in 47 years, right? Did you know that? 47 years. I used to use that. I'd say that in a speech and everybody was surprised because the press doesn't tell it like it is.
Yeah, it's like Groundhog's Day over here. The reason media didn't cover Kellyanne Conway's Bowling Green massacre was because it never happened. It didn't exist. There was nothing to cover. And the reason that there's no reporting on a 47-year high murder rate is that it also doesn't exist. There is no 47-year high murder rate to cover. Let's start with the murder rate chart, which, as you can see here, is near a 45-year low dating back to 1970. The truth is not slightly different when you look at this chart than what Donald Trump said. It's the complete opposite of what Donald Trump said. And you can see at the end of the chart there's a little spike from 2014 to 2015. But the overall rate here, Rachel, because I know that you're able to see and interpret visually things with your eyes, clearly we're not at a 45-year high, are we?
No, but this is a strategy that works for him. Last year when he put forth that tweet about the fake murder statistics from that neo-Nazi.
Oh yeah, the race-based murder data. Yeah.
Yeah, which was absolutely huge. He was leading in the field 9 points after that. And a CBS poll right after said that what Iowa residents liked most about him was that he was willing to say what other people wouldn't say. So
Yeah.
we've seen that this works for him.
Many times that willingness exists only in Trump because other people don't want to just blatantly lie and make up statistics. Violent crime, by the way, also way down, as I mentioned. We have a graph of that as well for people watching with us. If you look at violent crime, hitting a peak sort of in 1992 or so, and a very, very steady decline. And like Rachel said, Pat, Trump repeatedly misstated these figures during the campaign and continued to make erroneous claims about how violent the United States is right now. And it worked really well because people said, wow, things are really violent because they didn't fact check. I guess that means I should vote Trump because he's telling it like it is.
And he didn't think it was incumbent on him to fact check as well. And I think the other thing he got wrong here is that even if the murder rate was at a 47-year high, the media would love to cover that. We have a sensationalist media in this country, and they would be all over that story.
Yeah, there's no real reason based on our accurate understanding of corporate media why corporate media would hide that. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. We know about that. We know about the disproportionate coverage of terror attacks perpetrated by Muslims, the disproportionately low coverage of terrorist attacks perpetrated by white American dudes. We can probably bet that if Trump destroys the economy and key institutions of the U.S., the violent crime and murder rates will go up, but that's not where we are right now. The Trump era, I used to call it solutions that don't work for problems that don't exist. That's been my tagline for it, Rachel. I'm expanding it now to solutions that don't work for problems that don't exist, combined with projection and self-fulfilling prophecies. And that seems to be sort of the calling card of Trump. If your significant other, Pat, lied as much as Trump does, you wouldn't stay with them, would you? You'd say, this is emotional abuse.
It kind of goes back to the conversation we had yesterday about who could possibly be with Kellyanne Conway if she's speaking like that, you know?
Kellyanne Bowling Green Massacre Conway. Why is this important, right? It's not just another lie from Trump. If you believe that the United States is way more dangerous than it actually is, you're willing to tolerate or support different policies based on that. And a perfect example is the post-terrorist terrorist attack support that we see for more surveillance and more invasive spying by government agencies. So this is not just another lie, Rachel. This really matters.
No, it's not another lie. And I'm quite frightened to see how throughout the course of his presidency, this kind of negatively sways public opinion. It could be really dangerous.
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter at @DPacman. We are all on Twitter as a collective at David Pakman Show. Send me your thoughts about what's going on with Trump and his 47-year lies.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is John Kraulick. John, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. This is viewer and listener supported media. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. We do an entire extra show just for our members called The Bonus Show. Today on The Bonus Show, we will be hearing about Rachel's wild and wacky trip to South America. We won't even say what country yet, Rachel.
Yeah, let's
That'll
keep
be
it a
part
secret.
of it. Is it my home country of Argentina? No, it's not. Or is it? We'll find out on The Bonus Show today. You can also use coupon code IVOTED17 to get a major discount off of membership. Okay, it's time for Hatriot Mail. Here's a reminder about what Hatriot Mail is.
Because the government that is supposedly totally inept is the same government that can pull off a conspiracy that'll blow your mind. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
So I'm calling today's Hatriot Mail a cuck behind a screen, which is kind of funny. I feel like if there was a non-authorized biography of me done, the antagonists might call it that. The David Pakman story, a cuck behind a screen. Okay, that's the name of this week's Hatriot Mail, but let's actually listen to what this Hatriot had to say.
Now it's you libtard f***ers' turn to be in the crosshairs. Good. I hope Trump sicks the IRS on you scum like the muzzy ape did to conservatives. He can start with you, Pakman, then the Young Turks, then the nauseous Olbermann. The worm turns, assholes. David Pakman, you always be a cuck behind a screen.
I take issue with that. I'm a cuck behind a camera, not a screen, right? The person watching is the cuck behind the screen. Or I guess I'm in front of the camera. I don't know.
You know, it's too bad that Trump's going to come up after us first before the Young Turks and Keith Olbermann, so we don't really even have a warning when it happens.
Yeah, it just pops right up there. It's all happening clearly on Hatriot Mail. Remember, you can turn Hatriot Mail into something positive by using the coupon code Hatriot40 when you sign up for membership at davidpakman.com/membership. It'll take 40% off. That's huge. That is huge. 40% off of your membership if you use coupon code Hatriot40. The exponentially more disturbing revelations about what's going on at the Trump White House behind the scenes are starting to find their way into my dreams, or I guess I would call them nightmares. That's probably a better term for them at night. And a recent report may be the most disturbing yet. The other night at 3 a.m., which is usually when things seem to happen at the White House, Donald Trump was confused about the dollar. Is a strong dollar good for the American economy, or is a weak dollar good for the American economy? Let's skip that the president being so confused about the implications of a strong or weak dollar is in and of itself really, really scary. Let's put that aside for a second to get to the really bizarre part. In Trump's 3 a.m. confusion, he made a call at 3 a.m., not to an economist, not to someone who knows about the strength of the dollar and its implications with regard to the economy, but to his national security advisor, retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, according to two different sources familiar with the incident. Flynn's expertise is, of course, not in macroeconomics, but rather in counterintelligence. So he did the right thing and said to Trump honestly at 3 a.m., I don't know, maybe you should talk to an economist. Reportedly, Trump didn't like that when he called a retired member of the military at 3 a.m. for advice on currency fluctuations, the guy didn't have a strong answer for him. How can you be a master negotiator, international businessman, which Trump claims to be, and not understand the basic implications of a strong versus weak dollar?
I really just wonder what prompted this thought to come to his head at 3 o'clock in the morning, too. Yeah. I mean, maybe Fox News was playing some sort of rerun that covered this topic and he was up late watching that, because that's what prompted his flag burning tweet at, I think, 6 o'clock in the morning when that was.
We're seeing something, Rachel, that we don't often see from administrations this early on, which is you often see leaks from people who are sort of trying to help themselves within the administration, right? Leaks to make other people look bad for posturing, etc. But these are leaks that we're seeing from people that are just scared by Donald Trump's behavior. Here's a quote from Elliot Cohen, former State Department official under George W. Bush. I've been in this town for 26 years. I have never seen anything like this. I genuinely do not think this is a mentally healthy president. And then a White House aide who asked to remain unnamed said to the Huffington Post that because Trump doesn't like to read long memos, now they give him a single page with 9 really spread out, simple language bullet points. Light reading for Trump. This is the only way he'll take in data in written form.
Yeah, I actually, and this is not a joke, my grandmother is very hard of hearing and she has some early onset dementia. So when I'm trying to communicate with her, I type out a list of large words, about 9 bullet points. So this is very frightening.
That's how Trump aides are communicating with him. And really random little things are either really pleasing or upsetting Trump, and it's concerning to aides. Trump told the New York Times that he's fascinated with the phone system in the White House, for example. But at the same time, the hand towels aboard Air Force One were not soft enough for Trump. And that's something that he expended some energy thinking about. He's obsessed with how his aides are doing on cable TV. Most presidents aren't, for example, regularly watching the press secretary's daily briefing, in this case, Sean Spicer. Trump apparently is watching that regularly. This is all very disturbing behavior, isn't it?
It's all just so superficial, too. I mean, what your spokespeople are saying on cable news, how the towels are at the White House. I mean, pretty much anyone else would be flattered to live in the White House, and I think he sees it as a downgrade.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're used to everything being covered in gold plating in Trump Tower, if you go to the White House and it's appointed in a slightly less ostentatious way, which is crazy that we're even saying that, I guess it is sort of a downgrade.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, but also I think the bigger issue, even though we already know this, it's kind of just setting it in stone, is that he completely bypassed doing any work on his own, such as Googling what does a strong or weak dollar mean, and this is how he's going to conduct himself during the whole presidency. He's going to say, I don't need to do any work. I can just rely on people who have no information about the topic that I'm interested in to do it for me.
Who hasn't called a former member of the military at 3 a.m. to discuss macroeconomics?
I mean, I did last week, but I wasn't going to tell people about it.
Also, I've been reading that Trump heads up to the residence in the White House around 6:30 p.m. what I would give to be a fly on the wall from 6:30 p.m. until the 3 a.m. phone call to generals to ask about currency rates. Like, what could be going on during those 8.5 hours?
Should we be concerned that he's not sleeping that much?
He has long said he only sleeps like 4 hours a night and only needs that.
And he's proud of it.
Which is pretty widely debunked by science. Like, there
Yeah.
is a range of numbers of hours of sleep that are sort of like the natural restorative sleep for people, but 4 is outside of that range. I've not seen any science that suggests on an indefinite basis people can be properly rested with 4 hours a night.
Right. No, it can't. And there's all of the studies that we've seen time and time and time again about either overnight shifts or less sleep leading to earlier death rates.
And I think people like Donald Trump are that case in point, while you should probably sleep more.
Yeah, if there's ever been a case for sleeping more and the importance of rest, it's when you see Donald Trump call a general at 3 a.m. to say, hey, I'm the president. Can you just fill me in? Is a strong dollar good or bad? I think if we've ever seen the effects of sleep deprivation, it's that. Hey, this is truly, truly deplorable and also insanely scary. Donald Trump's staff tricked him into going along with that botched Yemen raid, reportedly by sort of goading him by saying, hey, you know what? Obama would not have been bold enough to do this. I told you earlier this week about that botched military raid in Yemen. It led to the deaths of 30 civilians. It led to the death of a U.S. Navy SEAL. It failed to kill its target, the al-Qaeda leader Qasem al-Rimi, which Donald Trump reportedly casually authorized this raid during dinner. Defense Secretary General James Mad Dog Mattis and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, reportedly convinced Trump to go ahead with the raid by suggesting to him, you know, Obama would never have been bold enough to actually go through with this thing. Trump heard that and apparently said, where do I sign my name to this thing? The president is being played like a chump, not only by Russian intelligence and Vladimir Putin, but now by members of his own staff, his own cabinet. Oh, stop overreacting, David. I mean, we have checks and balances in our system, and nothing like this could ever happen. Well, welcome to the Trump era. But there's another angle to this, because if this is true, I wonder if Steve Bannon was setting up Mattis to be the scapegoat for a failed operation at some later point in time, right? You're Bannon, if we believe Bannon is sort of really the guy in charge here. If we believe Bannon is to Trump as Cheney was to Bush, but even to a greater extent, and you want to see this raid happen, you convince Mattis to go in. You say, here's what you tell him, okay? You go in there, and when the shrimp cocktail comes out, he's going to be really distracted because he loves that shrimp cocktail. You tell him, you know, Mr. President, Obama would never have had the testicular fortitude to do this. You should do it. And then if it fails, you just go back and say, whoa, Mattis came in and he convinced Trump. This is all on Mattis.
He has his bases covered there, I think. I mean, there's a clear reason why Obama wouldn't authorize this raid, because there wasn't enough intelligence on the ground, and he thought that the risk to reward ratio just wasn't there. So he probably just should have done the same thing when in doubt, no?
Absolutely. And I'm reminded, when I imagine this scenario, Rachel, I imagine, now come on, you know who didn't eat their vegetables like a big boy? Barack Obama. That's who. You eat your vegetables, Donnie. That's effectively the strategy that's being reported here that convinced Trump to authorize a raid that led to the deaths of 31 people.
But this has been on a larger scale, too. This is why certain Republicans voted for him, because they wanted to get their Supreme Court pick, which they did. So if everyone's using this strategy, where are we going to be left in a few years?
Not in a good place. And the other thing I thought of, Pat, was that the facts are also wrong. Who believes that President Obama wouldn't have gone along with this type of raid if it actually makes sense? As Pat mentioned, Obama didn't authorize this particular raid because he didn't believe that the risk-reward ratio made sense for an authorization. But President Obama authorized a very risky raid after a lot of consideration. And it was the raid that led to the killing of Osama bin Laden, one that carried big risk and succeeded. So even the trick that's being used on Trump is based on the faulty logic that Obama wouldn't have authorized such a raid.
And while the Osama bin Laden raid was going on, Barack Obama was sitting in the Situation Room with all of his advisors around him. Reportedly, Trump was just at dinner and wasn't willing to go there.
What I read was that he was in the residence during the time that this raid was going on. Yeah. I mean, I just am so curious. Like, we know President Obama was reading a lot, right? He would be up in the residence. He'd be reading everything from autobiographies to nonfiction and novels, reading reports and briefings, etc. Do you imagine that Trump just sits up there watching TV and, I don't know, playing Snood on his phone or something? Like, I really don't know what it is he's doing up there.
I don't. I also just don't believe that he has kind of a basic historical knowledge that many other presidents have come in equipped with. And that is going to, completely shocking. And that is not going to fare well for him.
I wonder how many presidents Donald Trump can name. Certainly not all 44 or 45.
Maybe two.
If I had to put the over-under on how many, so I think he could definitely get Washington and Lincoln.
Himself.
He would get both Bushes and himself. That's 5.
He probably wouldn't name Obama.
No, well, he would. That's clever. He would name Obama and Clinton, so that gets us to 7. Teddy Roosevelt and FDR, I assume he would get, and Nixon, so that gets us to 10. Here's the real question. Would Trump name Ford? Is Trump aware of Gerald Ford? If you were to just say willy-nilly, name the presidents for me.
He was alive at that time, so I think he would know who that is.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't just come up with that name.
I would put, I think a fair over-under for naming presidents for Trump would be 13.
Okay.
I think that at 13.
Between 10 and 13, I would say that sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. After the break, I think you're really going to like this. I'm going to speak to information warfare expert Molly McKew. She wrote a stunningly good article called Putin's Long Game recently. And we're going to talk to her after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined today by Molly McKew, who's a foreign policy and strategy consultant and an information warfare expert. Molly, for people who maybe hear information warfare and think, oh, we're just talking about hacking, what are we really talking about when we use that term?
It's a very good question, and I think it's one that's been discussed a lot in the last few months in the wrong way. There is this sort of focus on cyber attacks and hacking and leaked information, but information warfare is really about narrative and about ideas and about putting information into a space in order to achieve specific goals. For example, during the early days of the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you had these narratives about Ukrainian Nazis and, the Russians needing to intervene to provide security. That's a really good example of information warfare, where it's using information to create a pretext for other intervention.
And as someone who has worked as an advisor to Mikhail Saakashvili, then the president of Georgia, as you observe the different allegations that were made with regard to Russian attempts to influence the American election in November, did particular aspects of it strike you as consistent with your experience and or not consistent? What was your sort of general reaction when these allegations started flying?
I think for those of us that work in the area around Russia, none of this was particularly new or surprising. The Russians have used this type of information architecture and these type of tactics against their opponents and against countries that they believe they need to weaken or influence in some way for many years. And it's gotten more advanced, and their tactics are more developed and easier to replicate because of the internet, but particularly because of social media and the kind of echo chambers that they've been able to establish using Facebook and Twitter and other sort of media to kind of create the impression of more support for ideas that they are in favor of than there really is. But this is the types of things that you saw during the US election, which were the amplification of particular narratives and stories that were not necessarily things of particular U.S. interest or concern before they became kind of social media phenomenon. It's very much the type of tactic and that the Russians have used in other countries, in Georgia, in Moldova, in Ukraine, in the Czech Republic. Now they're using them in France and in Germany as well. But they do it for specific political purposes, to influence elections in many cases, or to influence sort of social opinion or attitudes toward Russia or toward the West. But they're getting very good at streamlining these initiatives and deploying them to new places in quick, fast, easily replicable ways. And we need to be much smarter about how we identify them and how we counter them.
Talk a little bit about that. When you talk about the identification of these techniques, at what sort of operational level do we need to be thinking? Are we completely operating at the wrong level if we're trying to figure out which of two American presidential candidates Vladimir Putin would prefer be president? Like, is that sort of missing the plot altogether?
There is a piece of this is identifying what we refer to as disinformation about completely untrue facts or stories or narratives that are sort of put into a space in order to influence how people think. That is a very specific type of information warfare, but it's the least important of them in many ways, because it is easy to see in some respects what is a lie and what is true. The more confusing part, especially for media to identify or to react to, is this idea that sometimes the information itself does not matter. It is the reason that the information was put into a space. And a good example of that is this leaked dossier that was passed around from sort of out of London. This former MI6 operative working in a private capacity, had compiled some information about now President Trump's ties with Russia, and this had sort of been leaked to the media. It doesn't really matter if anything in there is true or not, if it was real or not, if it was the FSB trying to give this guy bad information to feed into his clients or not. The point is that the Russians want to create the appearance that they have a deep relationship with President Trump, that they are influencing what he does and how he acts, and that President Trump is not doing very much to counter that idea. That is really the fact that you can see in the entire operation, but it's very hard to get past the true or not analysis of information into what was the point of the action of introducing the thing. And it's a different way to think. It's very hard to do. But it's how we need to start understanding how the Kremlin operates, but also how other governments and individuals, including to some extent President Trump's administration, are emulating this type of information architecture.
Right, and I find that very interesting, and I think you wrote about this to some degree in a great article that I recently read of yours, which is that when we analyze a specific obvious untruth that is being parroted by the Trump administration, that the sort of layer one is, well, what are the facts of that particular story? But that there's this underlying, I don't know if I would call it a motive or sort of reality or context, where if you can get people to just more generally be really unsure of what they can believe as a more general principle, that can also play to the advantage of the establishment or the party in power, right? This idea that, hey, you know what? They may not believe what we're saying, but they'll question whether they can believe anything. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that can be useful?
This is, to a great extent, this is the goal of the modern Kremlin-backed information warfare. They're not trying, it's not the 80s anymore. They're not trying to put forward a vision or a narrative of the world that is the counter truth to us, that is the one thing that everyone should believe. It is very much trying to create this idea that everyone is basically the same. We're all flawed. Nobody has the right to speak or to judge or to speak truth for anything, that there is no truth. It's all just confusion and chaos. And that is a very effective way to sort of put forth some of these stories and narratives, and a very effective way to counter the types of values and ideas that the United States of America has for many years tried to champion in the world. And you saw a great example of that this past weekend in the interview that President Trump was giving before the Super Bowl. There was sort of this amazing exchange where he said, if we can work with Putin on fighting terror, we absolutely should. And if we can work with the Russians to fight ISIS in the Middle East, then we absolutely should be doing that. And O'Reilly kind of countered to that, but Putin is a killer. Can we work with a killer? He's a killer. And Trump didn't dispute that he was a killer. He just said, so are we. Americans are killers too. And that's the kind of moral equivalency that the Kremlin echo chamber has really tried to create for, in particular, the last 10 years, but even before. This idea that no one is morally right, that there is just chaos and sort of confusion in the world. And coming through that, what you need is strength and certainty and strong leaders and screw values and morals and everything else. What you need is sort of strength and certainty of leadership. And that is where you have figures like Putin and others sort of stepping into the space, offering solutions and outcomes that are not democratic, that are not inclusive, that do not champion tolerance, but that champion these sort of very dark dystopian visions of the world that we live in and what we should pursue.
This is sort of inherently a question that we could really only speculate on at this point, but I'm split when I observe different events that take place under the Trump administration, some related to Russia and some not. And I go between sort of two perspectives. One is that this is a very carefully calculated action statement or whatever. And like the O'Reilly, we're also not that great, or we're not, we're also guilty of some of this, whatever the exact wording was. I go back and forth between thinking it's incredibly calculated and thinking that Trump's clueless and there's just sort of unintended consequences that may end up benefiting Russia or Vladimir Putin. Is it even possible to clearly figure out whether some of what's going on is calculated or just ignorance?
And if you're talking particularly about the president and his talking points, I think it's hard to know if they are his or if they were presented to him by those around him as things that he should be saying. But I do think there's tremendous calculation behind specific aspects of the information and narrative that he is offering to the American people. You saw it in his inaugural address, this idea of American carnage, that we live in this terrible, lawless country. He's sort of expanding this now with this new idea that there's all these terrorist attacks that none of us know about because our dirty media doesn't report about it, but that the world is much more unsafe and untrue than what we actually even know. And that is very much a tactic that you see of sort of aspiring totalitarian structures, this idea that only I can protect you, only I see the threats to you. And I think that there's enough coming from the president and from his team on this topic that this, to me, is the theme that runs through a lot of the chaos that you see in the White House. Yes, there are all these executive orders. Yes, there are these sort of missteps and false starts and, moving back from something. But the thing that runs through it is this. It's this idea of, crime, of terrorism, of dark forces working against us that we can only protect ourselves from by working with really bad guys and walling ourselves off from the world. And only by accepting the tactics of sort of civilian slaughter and bloodbath will we be able to actually fight terrorism in the way that we should have been doing from the start. This sort of category is the centerpiece of what they are presenting to the American people. And that is extremely worrying because it points to a centralization of power, the belief in a security state, and the sort of structure under which they will form these new alliances with countries like Russia and others who are not democratic, who are not liberal. And I mean that in a small L way, not in a blue or red way. But countries that don't believe in the idea that individual rights and freedoms matter in the world, that everything should be sacrificed to the good of the state.
Seems to often go back to that broader reality when we do an analysis of many different aspects of what's going on with the Trump administration. We've been speaking with Molly McKew, foreign policy and strategy consultant, information warfare expert. Molly, really appreciate you coming on today.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We already know that Donald Trump is spending way too much time just watching TV at the White House, but we've now learned that the White House, and Trump specifically, have been really shaken up by Melissa McCarthy's Sean Spicer parody on Saturday Night Live this past weekend. Now, I didn't find the impression to actually be that good and thought the segment dragged a little bit, but the fact that it has so bothered Donald Trump is something I can really get behind. You like the thing, right, Pat? You seem generally very positive on it.
Well, I don't think the impression was spot on, but I thought the substance was great there. I mean, it wasn't really that even much of a parody because she was using the exact same techniques that he was using with the media.
Yeah, the press conferences themselves are almost like parodies. And we know that Trump has already been kind of displeased with Sean Spicer since that first appearance where Trump forced Spicer to go out there and blatantly lie about the size of the inauguration crowd. And we now have learned that Trump really didn't like how Melissa McCarthy impersonated Spicer, and that it has really made Trump consider whether Spicer is a liability. And this is the most amazing part to me. Trump is apparently mad that Saturday Night Live chose a woman to play Sean Spicer. As this is from Politico, which wrote about this on February 6th. More than being lampooned as a press secretary who makes up facts, it was Spicer's portrayal by a woman that was most problematic in the president's eyes, according to sources close to him. Later, a Trump donor added, Trump doesn't like his people to look weak. Remember that Trump told people that nobody has more respect for women than he does. And it's fascinating that what reportedly angered him the most about this is that a woman played his male press secretary. And if there's any indication at how upset Trump is about this, when he's generally upset, he'll immediately go to Twitter. Here he was actually completely silent. And that actually tells us maybe even more about how bothered he is about this. Here's what really is stunning to me. If you're going to be upset about your press secretary being so terrible at his job that Saturday Night Live decides to parody him in this way, shouldn't you be upset about his lack of skills rather than the fact that he's being played by a woman?
Well, definitely not, given every single person that he's hired. I feel like he believes he doesn't have a way to kind of undermine these comedians, and kind of the weight that they've been holding throughout this election has definitely got under his skin.
It's very odd. It is very, very odd that that's what he's focusing on. And Twitter instigators sent out a call to Rosie O'Donnell, the longtime foe of Donald Trump, saying you should play Steve Bannon during an upcoming episode of Saturday Night Live. And as we talked about on the bonus show, Rosie O'Donnell said she would actually do that.
Yeah, it would be nice because Rosie O'Donnell is, of course, Donald Trump's arch nemesis. But I think how Steve Bannon was portrayed in the last episode of SNL was perfect.
Fabulous.
He was a skeleton.
The attitude from Trump, if he wanted to totally diffuse this, would be, I'm happy for Saturday Night Live. I support freedom of speech. Even if I don't agree with the substance, they're hiring great actors and these impersonations are great. It would totally deflate the entire thing. Instead of fueling the fire, which has now happened as we found out that Trump was angry that his press secretary, who's a man, was played by a woman on a comedy show that now has gone completely viral. He is actually mishandling it. He could deflate the entire thing if he reacted in a slightly different way. Let's talk about Alex Jones and InfoWars. Crackpot conspiracy theorist and talk show host Alex Jones said over the weekend that he loves Trump so much that he's ready to die for him. I'll remind you that this is someone who claims that his conspiracy website, InfoWars, will be getting a seat in the White House press room if they want it under Trump, although the White House has, in their defense, denied that they've offered a seat in the press room to InfoWars. Here is Alex Jones making the completely unhinged proclamation that he's ready to die for Donald Trump.
Trump is so fire-breathing.
It's already good.
So energetic, so cunning, so real, and he's having results so amazing that it just makes me be endeared to Trump. I'm ready to die for Trump at this point. And I'm already ready to die for America. It's the same feeling I have for America because he is America. You're America.
Right.
Because I study policy. I'm a policy wonk. And I know that Trump and Bannon really know what's happening. They're really trying to cut taxes. They're really trying to get loans to small businesses. They're really trying to get us out of carbon taxes and Obamacare. And they're doing it. They're delivering. And it's so well thought out. It's so good. I've studied history. I've covered politics for 25 years, 21 on air. And I've never seen anything like this. This is bigger than 1776 if Trump can deliver. And then I see all of the news. I've got articles today. There's tens of thousands of bureaucrats that are going to leak everything you're doing militarily and sabotage you. That's called treason. That's executionable.
I agree with Alex Jones on one thing, which is I've also never seen anything like this going on in American government, but my view on it is a little bit different. Does anybody else find it weird that Alex Jones subscribes and parrots all these conspiracy theories about government paranoia and corruption, the Illuminati, but then he's praising arguably the most authoritarian big government billionaire who's ever been in the White House? It's sort of a conflict, isn't it?
My theory is that he's going to have to turn on Trump at some point. I mean, you can only prop up Pizzagate and conspiracy theories against the media for so long. He'll make a 180-degree turn on Trump eventually.
I'm increasingly convinced this is a character, and Kurt Nimmo, who formerly worked for InfoWars, said that basically Alex Jones has figured out that this entire new pro-Trump thing is profitable. Because remember, Jones believes 9/11 was an inside job, said the government controls the weather and creates tornadoes. He said the government's using chemicals to turn people gay. So I am increasingly convinced, Rachel, that this is just a business decision for Jones.
It has to be a business decision, or I would severely be worried about his mental state, I think.
I've told this story before, and a lot of people like it, and some may not have heard it, so I'll tell it again. I personally believe that, I sound like Miss South Carolina, I personally believe that some people don't know Alex Jones because they haven't met Alex Jones. When I met Alex Jones at the Talkers New Media Seminar a few years ago, he gave a speech. And the speech was mostly about sort of like online video, and it was like a very technical speech. It wasn't about politics. And he threw in just a few little conspiracy type things. But if you had heard him speak, you'd be like, oh, this is just a media executive talking about profit and loss. And then afterwards, I was in a really small group of people. It was me with Alex Jones, and then the two guys from Free Talk Live, which is like a libertarian-leaning show produced in New Hampshire, Mark Edge and Ian Freeman. And we were just chatting, and Mark and Ian knew Alex Jones. I was just sort of like the guy that sidled up without knowing anybody just to listen to what the big boys were talking about. And Alex Jones said something. First of all, he was not talking like I've ever seen him talk on any clip. He was just talking like a normal guy, like you and I are talking right now. And he said something like, how do you guys think that went? I thought about really freaking him out, but I decided not to, sort of saying like he could have turned on the conspiracy voice and the conspiracy talk, but that he chose not to. And the entire context and conversation I observed was of an Alex Jones that is probably non-existent to anybody who's only watched his videos. So that's why I think it's all fake.
I think sometimes he intentionally comes out with these sound bites like 1776 will rise again, or that they're trying to make the frogs gay. And this is just the latest one.
So we've debunked it.
Well, this is my opinion. I mean, again, it's possible that it's the opposite, which is the real guy is the conspiracy nut, but he knows how to put on a normal character when he's in like a social situation or something like that.
The strange thing is that we have a conspiracy theory going on Alex Jones, who comes up with so many conspiracy theories of his own.
Well, I don't think there's any conspiracy. In other words, I think it's just a character. Like it wouldn't be a conspiracy that just Alex Jones portrays himself in a particular way on his show, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like the opposite angle that he claims it to be. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I'm making the assertion that his entire public persona is fake, but to call it a conspiracy, I think it's going a little bit far. We have a voicemail number. It's 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's another idea about the entire Trump didn't know that he was signing an order to put Steve Bannon on the National Security Council story. Here's a suggestion about what the truth might be from a viewer.
Hey, David, this is Stray from Maryland. I'm calling about Trump saying that he didn't know that he put Bannon on that council. And what I think why he's saying that is just because of his reactionary nature that we've seen over the course of his campaign and all of that, he knew that he was putting Bannon on, but then after everyone making fun of it on SNL, and all that, which of course we know Trump loves his TV, that he's saying that he didn't know just because everyone's talking about it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Dave.
That's a good idea, which is we reported Trump had no clue what he was signing when he put Steve Bannon on the National Security Council. It's possible that he did know, and then after there was so much in the media, which maybe Trump was surprised by or didn't get, criticizing him for having put Bannon on there, he decided to say, oh, you know what? I didn't even read it. I just signed it without reading it. Interesting hypothesis. I don't know that we'll ever really know, but quite an idea presented there.
There are really no scenarios that make Trump look good here, though.
No, it's what makes him look slightly less bad. And I actually don't know what the answer is there. On the bonus show today, we will hear about Rachel's wild adventure to South America. I will tell you what percentage of Australian Catholic priests have been accused of sexually abusing children. Think of a number and now double it. Well, no, maybe that's too high. I guess it depends what number you first thought of. We'll expose the number on the bonus show. Pat confused by my math right now.
Yes.
And the David Pakman Show coffee is now available. We will discuss that on the bonus show as well. davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up today. Get instant access. Coupon code if you want a discount. You don't have to take the discount, but if you want a discount, use the coupon code IVoted17.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.